Te wata haura nanya nene ke ra toko toho nunya nene manara hanunya ne ke rahato wahata ke wahano nene me wana rahanunya na kete te rahanunya ne ke ate o yo yo.
Welcome to Birdsong with your host, Kayuda Kiora, exploring all things related to the path of shamanism, nature-based spirituality, truth-seeking, storytelling, awakening, health and wellness, earth-honoring traditions, ceremony, ritual, rites of passage, and of course, a remembering of the sacred ways. Hey everyone, it's Caillou here. Welcome to another episode of Birdsong. And in this particular conversation, we have Heath Myers joining us. Heath is a quantum evolution and leadership coach. He's a divine channel for various star races, elementals, and enlightened masters. He's a healer, a thought leader, and he's the founder of Mastery Matrix and the Starseed activations. His mission is to activate the Starseeds and mobilize their service to the world in pursuit of the rapidly accelerating planetary evolution. Now, if you don't know what Starseeds are, alongside other words like Lightworkers, timelines, codes, well, these are some of the terms that we dissect and demystify within our dialogue. So, Heath's journey into spiritual evolution and purposeful business work was catalysed by a life-changing spiritual awakening, the story of which he also shares within our conversation, and the result of which saw him searching for answers. So this marked the beginning of nearly 20 years dedication to a vast array of personal and professional development, healing modalities, shamanic practices, and embodied arts. Now, within that time, he's built a successful, impact-driven business that has transformed the lives of thousands of people and assisted hundreds of other way showers to expand their influence and aid humanity. And he does a lot of this through holding channeled planetary activation ceremonies, coaching purpose-driven business owners, conducting social responsibility programs, and leadership facilitation for senior leaders in financial institutions. So, Heath takes me relatively deep into what felt like for me some metaphysical, esoteric, 12-dimensional conversation points here, talking on all manner of things related to these concepts and this paradigm, such as the rise of new forms of language to articulate the spiritual evolution that the collective is stepping into. As mentioned, we deconstruct or demystify some of the words like Lightworkers, Starseeds, timelines, codes, all of these terms, this language that is often spoken in spiritual communities. We talk about the path of awakening, remembering our divinity within, soul-aligned service, the differences between purpose and a sense of purpose, being in service, and much more. So, okay, that's it. Thanks for being here, and I trust you'll find value in this conversation with Heath to carry with you on your own path forward. I'm really pleased to be able to sit down and have this conversation with you so that you can share your own birdsong here with myself and obviously all the listeners, and in doing so, do what you do best, which is help others attune to their own birdsong. So firstly, welcome to the show, brother.
It's a pleasure to be here, Cry. It's really deeply honored that you invited me to come and have a chat, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are a number of things that I would love to explore with you, which, look, they ultimately coalesce to form what you largely language as soul-aligned service. It's being in service to the greater good by being aligned to the calling of heart and soul. Mm-hmm. But look, firstly, the primary theme, the roots that form the foundation for this show is honoring the sacred. So in honor of opening up this container of our time together and in honor of the sacred, I'd love to invite you to share any words or anything else that's coming through to open up our conversation and our time together.
Yeah, I have a little sort of little mantra process that I use in setting up my day, and I teach this to all the people who come and work with me as well. It's just a little way of kind of honoring the divine that we are and the divine that's in all of us. And my feeling is that there'll be a little bit of sort of frequency stuff that'll come off the back of that. How does that sound?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah? Oh, awesome. So this is for you and for anyone else watching this as well. it's beautiful energies coming through. Yeah. So just bringing all of your attention, all of your awareness, and all of your focus into your heart. And we tune into our heart and we just say, I'm infinitely grateful for the divine presence I am, for the divine love, power, and wisdom I am, forever and always. Thank you. I am. I'm infinitely grateful for the divine physical temple I have, the divine mind, body, and emotions that I have, forever and always. Thank you. I am. I'm infinitely grateful for this divine heart. Divine heart, thank you for the divine presence, the divine love, power, and wisdom that you are within me forever and always. Thank you. I am. Thank you for being a portal into the divine presence that I am in truth. Divine heart portal, open and activate. Expand, 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 expand. Just feeling into all the feelings and sensations and emotions and energies that are present in that heart portal. Beautiful. And just giving thanks for Source. I'm infinitely grateful for the divine presence of Source, Source energy, the Source codes that I'm here to anchor for humanity, that we're here to anchor for humanity. Infinitely grateful for the presence of our divine guidance team, our 12D soul family, soul I am, soul frequency I carry, and my higher consciousness. Thank you for blessing and immersing these light bodies, this body, this being, this channel, blessing this space, blessing this conversation, all the people listening to it, all the spaces that we touch through technology, raising the vibrational frequency of it to the highest vibrational frequencies of our soul and the source codes that we're here to anchor for humanity. And then just bringing our awareness into the crystalline core of the planet and just saying, I'm infinitely grateful for this, for the divine earth, for your divine support, for your divine sustenance and your divine healing that you are within me forever and always. Thank you, I am. Infinitely grateful as the center of this infinitely oscillating field of ever ascending frequencies of divine love and light, and so it is. Yo, yo, yeah, 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 yeah. Te watahana nyenene kere wahatutu nyenene wana mahakara hatuti wahana kate o yo yo yo. Oh. Just connecting, establishing a really beautiful, firm connection between our heart and the core of the earth, and our heart and our soul star, our galactic presence. So it is. Beautiful. I.
And so it is, brother.
Awesome. Yay.
Spoken and brought in with much clarity. And this is something that I've been so curious, so interested in for a while now. And it's this idea of channeling. And, well, clearly it's more than just an idea. It's a felt, lived, embodied experience. And I've seen you language this as advanced channeling. Is this what you'd call it? Tell me a little bit more about this.
Yeah, it totally is channeling. Yeah, I always, these days I actually am openly exploring and admitting that I am a channel, but it took me years and years and years to admit that. And I think it was because in my head, it's like, you needed to be sort of Abraham, Esther Hicks, or, someone of that ilk, or Bashar or something to call yourself a channel. And that sure is ultimately just part of it, like channeling other aspects of divine consciousness or sharing your field with that and becoming a vessel for that is one aspect of channeling. But what I started to realize was that that ultimately I've been channeling for ages, and that that this process of, from my perspective, the process of ascension and self-actualization that we're going through individually and as a collective is actually a process of opening to channel, the divine presence that we are, the I am, and that is a channel. It is a channel. So yeah, I would refer to all of that as channeling. Yeah, absolutely. And the emergence of soul mastered characteristics is part of that as well. Things like light language, like I was speaking, I didn't learn that anywhere. I just all of a sudden knew it one day, remembered it. Healing modalities, whatever it is that comes forward for us, and when we're doing the work that our soul is here to do, that's what I would also classify as channeling as well.
Yeah, as I said, I find channeling really interesting, and to provide a bit more of a foundation for myself and our listeners in regards to all that you've just shared, I read in your bio, and I've seen you talk about this somewhere, and this is, well, it's about this earlier experience of yours that acted as a pivot point that led you down the path that you're on today. And we could call that an awakening experience. And from what I understand, this was during a medicine journey of some sort. So I'd love if you could share that particular story to provide a little bit of context into where you are today.
Yeah, so about 20 years ago, DMT. So I've been on the festival scene and DJing and being a part of creative events for nearly 30 years now, probably even more. And yeah, so about 20 years ago, DMT was pretty new on the scene as a psychedelic in festivals and that kind of thing. I had heard of it, but I hadn't actually ever met anyone who'd had it. And I was at a prominent festival, and a friend of mine said, "Oh, I've just had this amazing stuff called DMT," and I said to the guy, "Hey, you can't just leave me alone with this. You have to let me find a friend and let them have it." So he said, "I made it a point within myself that the first person that I ran into who was a close friend would be that person, and it's you. Let's go and have it." So yeah, so it was administered by someone who essentially introduced themselves as a research scientist, who was actually had been making organic acacia resin DMT. So it was particularly strong. And it wasn't one of those instances where it's like people are carving up your little dose of DMT. It was like, boom, here's your dose, a well held, practice runs and beautiful held environment. It was really quite wonderful.
Yeah, paint a little bit of a picture for us if you don't mind, because when I tend to think of a festival environment, what I imagine is a large conglomeration or a large congregation of people. So what was it like?
That's right. We were miles off into the forest. Like my friend got lost like 5 times getting us there, and then finally we found them because they were just right at the back, like barely even to the festival. Very small circle of people who'd all consciously had it before. Were aware that someone was coming, that they were going to facilitate a beautiful experience for. The guy who facilitated it was, expert at it. He knew a lot about it from a psychological sense as well. And just basically created this beautiful environment in nature. And, did a test runs with me, dry breathing and all sorts of stuff to make sure that I could get as large a hit as I did. And and I did. It was I couldn't have inhaled anymore. And had it was for me at the time. I mean, I'd had psychedelics and I'd also had spiritual experiences. I was already starting to open up, and to a certain extent was already quite awake. But I didn't know what to expect from it. And within, pretty much, 10 to 20 seconds of having inhaled it, I remember my entire reality. It was like someone threw a brick at the 3D world and it shattered, like it literally shattered like glass, and fell apart piece by piece until I was in infinite white. And then I had multi-dimensional experience, a classic experience of dying, where the earth absorbs you and then you leave your body and you see yourself leaving your body as you feel yourself leaving your body. And all of this went, and I was just in infinite white for a timeless period of time. And then all of a sudden there was the earth, just the earth. And then I watched the entirety of the earth form. It was like every tree around me grew in like 5 seconds and just grew out into this new form that was colors and geometry that I had never seen before consciously, but it wasn't new. Like as I saw it, it was like, oh yeah, of course, it had this real, there was a knowingness in it, you know. And yeah, quite an amazing experience. And I sort of started to come to a little bit and looked out in front of me, and there was a series of multiple-eyed beings sitting in front of me.
Classic like DMT, sure.
Classic DMT. You know, multiple-eyed beings, these kind of crazy-looking alien dudes. And as I looked at my own structure, I realized that I was one too. I was very alien. I was like, wow, okay. And so we had a telepathic conversation, and while I was sitting there just having this experience, I went into what I can term as all-knowingness was the experience, you know, where my ego and my every fact, everything I knew, everything I held on to as a truism, as everything I was attached to, that I guess sort of, you know, as knowledge and awareness and structure, and that essentially formed the identity of who I am, was actually just completely stripped, like to the point of like, I know nothing and I am nothing. And in that, I realized and recognized myself as everything eternal. And in having emptied myself of that, went from having knowledge to having no knowledge, and instead being all knowing. And and I remember it perfectly, this feeling instead of like a question would arise, and as the notion of a question arose, within a split second, there would be the feeling of satisfaction of isness and knowing. And so it was just I could just feel it coalescing, the polarities coalescing the whole time. And as that was happening, of course, these multiple-eyed beings said, "Do you have any questions?" And I looked right at all their eyes and said, "No, there is no questions. There is no answers. It just is." You know? And I am. And they were like,
"You've got
it." Correct. Right answer.
Tick on the scorecard. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you just passed your galactic exams. Well done.
Graduation.
And with that, there wasn't anything that was said, but what I knew in that moment was a part of the knowing was that that experience and whatever came with it in some way, shape or form, that now defined my life as a purpose to share that deep secret that actually we all already know to be true. You know? And yeah, so, you know, I started to come back in, universe started to align. I came back into my body, and still everyone had this third eye that was just like so real, like just there. And I thought, I've got to get back into this festival. So I got up and went out to the festival. And at the time, I was really into recreational substances. So it wasn't the only thing that was in my system. And so I kind of was afforded this prolonged period that a lot of people don't get on DMT, where I probably was in and out of that space, but very consciously and interacting in a really grounded and clear way with large groups of people and friends, while still in that space because of the concoction that was in my blood system, which I really feel in retrospect was a real gift, because it helped me interact it and ground it and normalize it, you know? Yeah, which was beautiful. And yeah, and so that was an amazing experience. And then 3 days later, I what happened was that I'd started to turn in against myself, and it marked the beginning of a real journey of really seeing the work that I needed to do, you know. And in retrospect, I think the awakening experience was so deep and so profound that it triggered in me a psychosis of some description. Yeah, mild psychosis that I believe in retrospect I probably worked through and was quite functional, holding down jobs and, you know, doing all sorts of things for a good 3 years. But what it did was it saw me leap deep into mystery schools and quantum physics and metaphysics and healing arts and martial arts and mindfulness and different embodiment arts to try and put myself back together, but also to try and integrate and understand what I had experienced,
Yeah, to gain a well-rounded, holistic, encompassing understanding.
Yeah, and becoming a practitioner and becoming a way shower is actually something that has happened as a result of the journey that had to take place after something like that happened.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of what you touch on resonates with my own journey. Similar kind of pivot points along the way. And look, where you are now, from what I see, there's no doubt that a lot of people are resonating with what you're putting out in the social media lands. And look, what's interesting to me is noticing the rise of a particular way of articulating spirituality in a sense. So I'd love to explore this with you. I'm talking about words like Starseeds, Lightworkers, quantum timelines, because let's just say a couple of decades ago, perhaps this language wouldn't have been as accepted or as understood as deeply on a collective level as perhaps people might understand it today. And look, granted, I wasn't walking this path a decade or 2 decades ago, so I can't really say with great certainty to what degree it would have been accepted or understood, but I get the vibe that it wouldn't have been as understood or accepted on a collective level. But that aside, what and where I'm interested in continuing on as a further launching point for the rest of the convo is finding similar ground, being on somewhat of a similar page of understanding when it comes to the language that we're using or that you're using. And, I feel like there's definitely a bit of a line in the sand somewhere when it comes to getting caught up in language, but then on the other side of that, understanding or feeling the essence of what it is that's being communicated. But look, I reckon there's a bit of a point to be made that when it comes to a lot of the friction, the arguments, a lot of the emotional reactivity that we come across, especially in the social media space, is that people are often approaching an argument or a conversation from their own set of reference points. And those reference points include a specificity of meaning that we're assigning to individual words. So instead of trying to gain clarity on what the words mean that the other person's using, there's just the automatic reaction of jumping to conclusions of what we think we know what's being spoken about. So look, as an entry point, maybe we'll start with Starseeds and Lightworkers and get your articulation on that.
Yeah, well, and before we dive into that as well, like, because Starseeds and Lightworkers are metaphysical terms, but a lot of the quantum physical terms, so I'm not sure when What the Bleep Do We Know came out, but I think it really, because it put quantum physics in the mainstream and took it and injected it into the spiritual communities, and evidently a lot of people with metaphysical interests were drawn to that film and everything that sort of flowed on as a result of that film. What I think it did was it, like, for those who were scientifically minded, it all of a sudden gave us scientific parallels to use in scientific terminology to use to try and explain to a greater degree what we understand metaphysically, And I think, language itself is like, our ability to integrate something is when we have a vocabulary for it. For instance, like, emotional intelligence, a major component of emotional intelligence is actually having words to be able to describe them, right?
Sure.
And have others understand them. And that's what makes it you able to integrate it. And just by installing a vocabulary around something that doesn't have a vocabulary, all of a sudden forms a new level of intelligence that you can embody and work with. And I think what we're seeing is that we're at a point where it's kind of like, consciousness is rapidly evolving. People are waking up all over the place. And I think what's happening is that naturally a new language, a terminology language, a vocabulary is forming that is going to be part of what gives us the ability to be able to integrate it and work with it. At the moment, to those who don't understand it, it may seem like jargon, but I believe it's actually the beginning of a framework emerging where we can actually have conversations,
Yeah, look, and we can just look back into the past. It's Shakespearean language, those eras. And even right now, we have trouble understanding to some degree, or some of us do, the language that was used back then. Speaking to the same things, but it's just the way that we articulate ourselves. So we can certainly project that into current times in the future and extrapolate on that.
Yeah, totally. So Starseeds and Lightworkers. So Lightworkers essentially, and so this is my definitions that I place upon it. But as I understand it, Lightworkers are people who are consciously working with light technologies or healing technologies, who are interested in elevating the vibrational frequency of consciousness, raising consciousness on the planet, and through engaging in specifically in activities and processes and living lifestyles that are in honor of and assisting the evolution of both the planet and the collective consciousness of humanity. That's how I would define a light worker. You know, I believe there's a lot of light workers out there who wouldn't call themselves light workers, because, you know, like, who are out there essentially doing, you know, work in the trenches, you know, people out there getting up at 4 a.m. to go and help homeless people and this kind of stuff, who might not even be deeply spiritual on any level, but their life in some way, shape or form is dedicated to the betterment of others, to raise consciousness and bring a greater level of unity and equality to the planet. And so that's how I would that's how I would define a light worker. You know?
Yeah, sure. Just to input something in there as well, do you pick up on this perception that some people have when it comes to light workers only being associated with what we might articulate as ascension or ascension-based perspectives or practices? And I feel there's there certainly exists within some perspectives there a lack of integration when it comes to working with the dark or the descension, you know, initiation by descent, coming to know the darkness on a deeper level to really radiate the light on a much more expansive level.
Yeah. And I think, you know, look, I think there's the term light worker as well. Like, you know, I think it sort of gets I think there is a little bit of a, what's the word? There's some judgment on it, right? And that's because, you know, we're essentially bringing these higher levels of consciousness into the way that we engage in our lives, and to give our lives a greater sense of purpose and meaning, and ultimately align with the truth of who we are on a more tangible level. In that process, we are doing this in a physical way, which means we work within duality, right? And so that means that to a certain extent, we're bound within the illusions of duality as well. Like, we're working within it. We're bridging worlds, so to speak. And I think sort of like the term light worker sometimes gets a bit of backlash because it seems like a denial of the dark, and it seems like pushing out of the dark. And the way that I understand it is that there is no dark. Like, from a higher dimensional perspective, from a soul perspective, when I tune in my soul and I talk about dark, it goes, what do you mean? They're just lower vibrations of light. That everything is at the substance of all human behavior and all human expression is ultimately the source of it is love. It doesn't matter how distorted that love comes out, whether it comes out in war or genocide or rape or murder, or, you know, the essentially evil and dark ways. It's still just a distortion of love, you know?
So wait, let me try and wrap my head around this, because what I'm just recognizing now within myself is I'm picturing it on this linear kind of timeline, the polarity of light and dark, but we know that nothing really is has that linearity to it. It's all cyclical, it's all circle, it's all spiraling, it's all exactly. So
there is no questions, there's no answers. It just is. There is no light, there is no dark. It just is. It's just that light and dark are essentially conditions that we're giving to the universe, which in its true state is unconditional. And some people might hear me say that and go, "Oh man, you're just using that as avoidance and denial of form." No, in fact, it's absolutely the opposite. I'm stating that as a desire to see form for what it is in its truth. Not a denial of it, a actual, I want to see its truth. And the connection, the definitions that we place around things, you know. So it doesn't mean that there isn't discordant, dysfunctional, or dark associated shadow behavior that's evident within humanity, or that I don't have parts of myself that don't behave on those levels. Absolutely not. It's just that if we are the subjective, if this massive universal responsibility that we have as a human being is to hold this powerful subjective meaning, right, at the core of our existence, if that is like our true power, then see it for what it is, you know. And if we want to work with the shadow, then the way to work with it is to not see it as, to polarize it as something that we need to work against or get in there and fight with, or, or in some shadow work, it's earning your stripes. Yeah, I do shadow work, man. It's like, that's egoic. It's like, just see it as the distortion that it is, and that our job is to through our perspective, through our learning, through our life journey, is to be able to assist that lower vibrational distortion to move into a higher vibrational truth, and for that to become part of our wholeness and our completeness. And that, to me, is the process of healing and the process of integrating and resolving various parts of self. And so I think the light working community gets a little bit of a nudge from some people around this whole light and dark thing. But I believe that the light working community, to a certain extent, is not seeing the polarity of light. The people who call themselves light workers, actually, many of them do deeply understand that everything really is, and it's not a unicorns and rainbows statement, that everything is love and light, and our job is to bring that realization into everything.
Yeah, and look, that illuminates the importance, at least from my perspective anyway, in having these types of conversations with exactly the thing that I provided the context to, so we can gain a deeper understanding to what it is that we're actually talking about. And then obviously once a collective understanding grows, the conversations don't need to be had anymore, because there is that base level of understanding.
Yeah. And so Starseeds, how that fits in is like Starseeds, and again, this is how I understand it, is Starseeds are old souls, like ancient souls, whose souls originated in higher dimensional planes of existence in star systems far, far away from this planet. Classic Starseed races are things like Arcturians, Pleiadians, Orions, Vegans, Syrians. Like there's a whole bunch of ones that we're very familiar with and get spoken about a lot. But essentially, the concept is that Starseeds were our soul origin was there, and essentially our soul was birthed as like the little baby of advanced extraterrestrial races that exist on dimensional planes that are so far from 3D that it's very hard for us to wrap our mind around even existing in that form from a human level, But that soul being has incarnated throughout the galaxy and the universe on so many different dimensional planes, many of which have been through the Earth walk and on other three-dimensional planets throughout the universe, but most of which have been in these higher dimensional realms where, what that means is on a soul level, on an Akashic record level, we actually have built in within our eternal memory, the memory of being in an ascended state, the memory of existing in high dimensional planes up to 12D and beyond, and remembrance of advanced energetic consciousness technology. And so the Starseeds now, the philosophy around it is that we are those who are here now with, to a certain extent, a soul contract to activate. And that's why we're feeling really drawn to businesses and creativity and service that is not only what we want to do, what we love to do, but what we see as the greatest gift that we could give humanity. Because when you line these two things up, there is, for a starseed, it's bliss, and that's where we create in our genius, and that's where we're also more likely to invite these soul master characteristics forward,
Yeah, look, this is also fascinating to me, and there's so many tangents that I can feel my mind reeling that it wants to go down. Are you familiar with Carolyn Miss or Carolyn Mice? I don't know how to pronounce her name.
A little. Yeah, a little. I know who she is. I know her stuff, a little bit here and there.
Sure. Way back in the day, and I don't know if this was my first exposure to some of these types of concepts, but it's what's coming to mind. There was a book that she wrote. I think it's called Soul Contracts. And the way that I understood it and language it now on a very basic level is that our souls are given specific assignments before incarnating here on this earthly plane in these physical vessels, and we are to experience certain things so that we can learn certain lessons or embody or experience certain energies or archetypes here on earth. So with that knowing, it obviously points to the fact that consciousness, soul, spirit is not confined to the physical vessel. It's not a byproduct of the mind doing its thing on a neurophysiological level, but it exists outside of the physical vessel, of the physical manifestation, of the earthly realm. And during your opening prayer, you mentioned something you were calling in, or you acknowledged these 12 different dimensions, the 12 dimensions. So all of this stuff, there seems to be no way for us to gain a logical or rational understanding of this if we're only bound to this 3D world.
Absolutely.
Up here in the mind. So what comes to mind when I'm sharing this? And also I'd love to know a bit more of, and I'd love to have a bit more of an exploration on these different dimensions that you're speaking to.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, and it's very hard to understand it from the perspective of through our conscious mind. Like it is to embrace our higher dimensional nature is a non-stop journey of surrender and relinquishing power and control in all the ways that it shows up. It's like, so to really wrap our conscious mind around it is difficult, because even through my teachers, that as I understand it, and this is through my teachers and also through my guides, is that once we sort of get above, say, seventh dimension, there is no mind. There is no mind anymore. So it's kind of like we're trying to understand no mind through mind, and you can see where that gets challenging. Mm-hmm. But if we just look at it from this perspective, it's like 3D consciousness is the consciousness that we use in this paradigm of cause and effect and living within this three-dimensional existence, right? This hologram, whatever you want to call it, right? And so we have physical laws, like there's all the laws of the universe that exist, so far in complexity and simplicity that we don't even have words for them. But here in 3D, we're working with cause and effect, physical Newtonian kind of laws, right? And so that's life, right? That's how we engage in life. Then you've got fourth dimension, which is kind of like the astral, it's kind of like the dream realm. It exists outside of third dimension, but it also supports what goes on within the third dimension, because whilst the third dimension is, this physical Newtonian space, it is supported by higher dimensional structures that enable us through our inner world, through our imaginarium, to use these higher laws of quantum physics to actually create something within the 3D world. And that's the 4D, and the 4D is kind of like because it is the imaginarium, emotions can manifest very quickly. The fourth dimension is also somewhere where we can start the process of manifestation, like dreaming. When we sit down and we vision, we're working in a fourth dimensional perspective, right? It's like as I tune into, like, so if I tune into a couple of weeks from now launching a new program, it's like I've been tuning into it. I've been seeing myself sitting there with the participants, and I've been thinking about what is it that I'm going to, what's the order in which I'm going to deliver these things to them, and trying it on in different ways and seeing which one resonates with me. That is to a certain extent using the astral to create, because it's not here yet. I'm not doing it physically yet. So I'm using this non-physical space to work within, right? And the astral is where we visit when we're in our dream space to a certain extent. And the astral also is a place where certain forms of consciousness that can't descend far enough into the density of 3D they exist there as well. It's the space of a lot of elemental entities and not necessarily functional entities that are always here to help as well. And that's the 4D space. And then where, this whole sort of the ascension story that's going on at the moment, which has been going on for a while, I should say, is about us coming into 5D, right? And as I understand it, 5D is that consciousness that I spoke of, the all-knowingness. What dimension were we working on? That was, so my guides are telling me that was 6-dimensional consciousness moving into 7, right? So that's almost getting into the space of no mind, like bridging it, So 5D, as I understand it, is where we actually recognize that we have a full embodied understanding that you and I are the one thing. And that drives our behavior and our thoughts and our feelings and our mode of operation and our systems of governance and the world as it is. And it doesn't mean that the individual is lost within that. If anything, the individual is empowered further because we realize that we're all the one. The one, i.e. the individual, and the one, i.e. connected simultaneously. And so at which point we're freed from all of the thing that is, to a certain extent, the slave paradigms that go with separation, competition, needing to be better than other people, cause and effect, your fault, my fault, like all these kind of things just dissolve. And so it's my understanding that that's where we're heading. What comes with that on an energetic component, what comes with that on a, because as we as a collective move into these higher dimensional understandings, that the physical must then come with it, right? So what physicality looks like and feels like as we become a 5th dimensional race, I have no idea, and I'm not even going to pretend for a moment that I understand that or get that. And I also want to say that, my explanation of the 5D is my understanding of it. And I wouldn't for a moment consider that that's the whole and complete picture. In fact, I'm happy to sit in a majority of not knowing, because that enables me to experience it with even greater authenticity as it does come, But that's my understanding. Then once you get a bit above 5D, then it starts to get really hard to understand. And my understanding and the teachings that I work within is that what I'm working with, ultimately my spiritual guidance team, is a collective, a multiversal collective of all these, this multitude of parts of self, right? Aspects or extensions of the source being that I am, and that includes ascended masters, elementals, that includes, galactics, advanced civilizations, and it is not linear. So it's not to say that's all my past lives and my future lives. It's like, it's just all the now, and that's me, that's who I am. But what the difference is between, existing at 7 and understanding things at 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, I don't understand. I don't know. And in that essence, can't really comment on. But what I do know is that through my teachings that I've studied with my mentors, is that, that full extension of the soul family that I'm working with consciously is up to and extends to 12th dimensions.
Yeah, when you're talking about 4D and 5D, all of this stuff, this makes sense to me, and I feel like it makes sense to me on a rational and logical level, but perhaps that is because I've had prior experiences that have allowed me to tap into this without that 3D rational logical understanding. Yeah, it's been a felt sense embodiment experience so that I can go, okay, now I can make sense of this with my thinking mind. But anything above that, like you speak to, yeah, I have very little understanding of anything above those levels that you were speaking to, 6, 7D and beyond. And when you were talking about the 4D, the way that I articulate, it's like we're kind of entering the idea of different timelines here and tapping into different timelines when you're speaking about envisioning yourself putting on this program and all the things that are going to come through that and aligning yourself to it. This is kind of the same work on a quantum a quantum physics or a scientific level, if we want to articulate it like that,
Yeah.
as Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza. And I call it shamanic quantum anchoring, or, you know, shamanic quantum activations. It's envisioning what we want in the future, but it's pulling that into the present moment, and it's anchoring it here right now. So, I mean, just on a physical health level, when we're doing that, the cascade of hormones and chemicals that are being flooded throughout the body from that future vision are being released in the present moment now. So just on a healing level, extremely beneficial. But,
Totally.
you know,
And what that's doing though is because we are quantum beings, that feeling, that experience that you're having, which is essentially carrying the coding of that future moment, is influencing your current understanding as the now vibration that you are holding consciously, right? Which means that, you know, from a quantum perspective, now you are bringing yourself into alignment with that reality, because it's not a distant thing anymore. It's a vibrational thing now, you know. So that's how it. Does that make sense? Like that, and that's the whole idea of, you know, this, you know, aligning with. You know, I talk about aligning with your highest timeline of limitless potential. Well, that is essentially tuning into the feelings and the sensations of your limitless potential as a future moment. Let's use linear time as a tool, as a quantum tool for the moment. Tuning into that, and then as you experience it, letting time collapse, because you're actually experiencing it now. So it's not a future thing anymore, right? And collapsing linear time completely into the now, and that's like boom, now you're on that timeline. But, you know, you can also get strayed from timelines, you know, through choices can stray you through timelines. So it's about making a continual aligned choice. It's like, you know, if you've ever given up, you know, an addiction or cigarettes or alcohol or something like that, it's like, you know, there's the big decision of like, yeah, I'm going to do this, but that's not the one that does it. It's the little decisions that you keep making that ultimately add up every day, every time you sit down. It's like if you used to have a cigarette with a cup of coffee, it's like every cup of coffee is a choice point. It could be another timeline you create right now, you know. And so, yeah, it is about tuning into that moment, altering your vibration now, but staying committed and disciplined to maintaining that vibration every time the world around you triggers you or lures you into the old timeline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense to me. What I want to try and do here is deconstruct or demystify the word timeline to an even more rudimentary level, if we can. Like, what do you have another way that you can articulate that for someone without any reference point for what we're talking about, so they can gain a very base level understanding of what it is that we're languaging?
The word that comes to mind is fate. And it's like, if you think about there was a movie that nailed this, and I've just lost the name of it. Is it The Butterfly Effect? It's a movie that's like shows. I think it's called The Butterfly Effect, where it's like it shows kind of like from the point at where this person is a kid, like how different their life ended up as a result of one circumstance and 4 different choices that they could have made.
Is this Ashton Kutcher?
I think it might be. I think it might be.
I don't know. I'm so out of loop when it comes to movies and pop culture, but yeah.
Feeling it is. Don't focus on it, listeners, but I'm pretty sure it is. And it's that kind of concept, right? It's like, you know, every choice that we make is opening up a potentiality of a sequence of events that's completely different to every other choice that we could make, of which there is, you know, on a quantum level, it's infinite. So it's like each one of those opens up a potential fate of sequence of events, you know. And so you can call those timeline. I mean, I started using the term timeline when I studied neurolinguistic programming, probably 10 years ago. There's a stream of neurolinguistics. Tad James actually brought this into NLP. It's called timeline therapy, and it's where you actually you go into your past to travel down the timeline of the past that's brought you to this point here. And ultimately, at this point here, you know, Tad teaches it as a straight line ahead. But from a quantum perspective, how I understand it, it's like Imagine your past is behind you and your future is in front of you. And really, there is just one pathway that you have traveled, and it's like a single line. It's the one that you've chosen. It's the one that brings you to here and now. So it's a single line that comes to you. You're here now, and that's the path you've chosen. But here in this free will choice point, from a linear time perspective, it's like there's infinite timelines that are just like out in front of you. And every choice that you make in every moment, you are aligning with those timelines and creating them simultaneously. And then whatever one you choose, that's the one that you go down. So the timeline is essentially the string of the course of events that is a vector that connects the point of now to any point in the future.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Yeah, that's clear. I hope that's clear for people listening. I feel like it should be. Yeah.
It's a vector. It's a vector.
Sure. Yeah. I've heard you mention a couple of times the word codes as well. This is something that I would love to deconstruct as well. The source codes, the heart portal codes, and look, zooming out, the codes of anything that we're talking about. And when I hear the word code in the context of spirituality, I can, it seems like with many of these words, there can be the association with the esoteric in a sense. But if I was to try and demystify that word myself, I might label it a very, very boring and unpoetic way of labeling that might be principles or frameworks in a sense.
Yeah. So I again, like, I'm really glad the word code has sort of come back into a lot of the quantum languaging that's going on at the moment. Really glad, actually, because I first came across it again when I studied NLP. And I remember them saying, like, everybody's unconscious mind stores and codes things in very unique ways. But there's structured formats that is the same between every single person as to how they store and code things as well. And so NLP was essentially studying those structured formats of primary representational systems, being like, for everything that you experience, the way you code that as a physical being will be through it equals this auditory component and this visual component and this kinesthetic component plus this auditory digital component all come together to create at an unconscious level an association to a particular thing that makes it so. Right? So that's what I loved about NLP, was it like, it just looked into the simple ways in which people code things. But then that code for everyone would be completely different. My code for going for a walk in the country is going to be different to your code for going for a walk in the country. My code for a certain film is going to be different to your coding for a certain film. And if we unpack that coding, we would both be sitting watching the same movie or walking on the same path in the forest or the country. But when we come back, if we actually used that to unpack the coding of how we coded it, it would be two completely different experiences. But we experience the same thing on the surface. Does that make sense? So that's kind of like, that's where I first came across the whole concept of coding. And it suggests that for every experience and every element of our field of consciousness, i.e. everything we are conscious of and not conscious of and are, has coding in place that actually holds that as our experience at an unconscious level. Now, that coding, if we then consider that we are quantum beings as well, we're not just talking about the way it's coded within our neurology. We're talking about the way that it's coded within our relationship to time, space, matter, energy, right? And it starts to get complex, right?
Yeah. The multi-dimensional sphere of what makes up the entirety of our existence.
Yeah, and then once we start sort of getting past 4D, 5D, it's like, again, it's the same as the conversation we were having before. It's like, how do you explain the coding for that? But as the language that's come through that is, to a certain extent, forming a calibration, like, a ruler is just a calibration. A centimeter is not a centimeter. And I love the fact that we have centimeters or inches, because it keeps us, and we have metric and analog kind of time as well, because it reminds us of the fact that these things are just fucking measurements, right? They're just calibrations. So language, the quantum language that's coming through for some of the energetic and metaphysical work that's going on, is just essentially giving us a calibration or a vocabulary to work within, so that we have an understanding of this. But as I understand it, it's like, also look at codes from the perspective of like what it really means. A code is a unique signature or a unique combination that makes something so. A code is a unique combination of information and elements that can be inputted into something that create a certain outcome or be extracted from something to create a certain outcome. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? So
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, at a really practical level, all of this coding within our consciousness that is not just formed from our human experience now, but it's formed through our multi-dimensional self, past lives, present lives, future lives, all now, is influencing our coding at a conscious level, an unconscious level, at a metaphysical and a higher conscious level. And that is essentially dictating our subjective experience that we have and how we think, feel, and act within that subjective experience. So when we do healing work to help people dissolve and release certain levels of coding, what we're essentially doing is extracting code that holds a certain dysfunction or a lower vibrational distortion in place, and poof, that thing no longer exists. To a certain extent, this is kind of like advanced kinesiology is a really good framework for understanding that. Muscle testing using certain frameworks to get into someone's consciousness, using maps to get into someone's consciousness to find out what is in there that's no longer in resonance, and then going through processes of clearing that through the meridian system, the chakra system, or through, with the guy I work with has experience in physio, so we do it through the physical being. So coding itself is, that's it that's how I would explain it on the more complex level. But the simple level is it is essentially the unique structure of your consciousness that holds certain experiences in place. And part of the language that's coming through from a quantum perspective to work with this stuff on a healing level is understanding that when you get a collection of codes together, you could call that a template. Yeah. And a collection of templates would essentially form what you would call a grid. Yeah. As Rupert Sheldrake, I think.
Sure. Morphic resonance.
Yeah, morphic resonance, right? So he came up with this concept of morphic fields, collective units of consciousness. Yeah. I would refer to them as grids. They're like and a grid is essentially it's a morphic unit that creates a certain outcome or creates a certain experience because enough people say it does. It's co-fused construct, like the shadow being shadow and light, that is a grid, that is a construct. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. So codes, the framework, the coding that, or the structure of our being on all levels that creates a certain experience. Templates is essentially collections of coding. So you could have you could have stuff that's physical template, that's your coding for your physical body, emotional template for your emotional body, mental template for your codes for your mental body, and grids being morphic fields or constructs that you work within based on that coding. There's certain grids that you just can't tap into if you don't have the coding. And if you want to, you have to receive the coding.
And how do we receive the coding?
Well, this is that's such a good question. So okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Cool. So, talking about timelines and alignment and all this kind of stuff, right? Here's how I've been shown it through my guides and through my spirit guides and through my teachers, right? And through my own journey. So, for someone who's been at this for 20 years, I'm really only being super vocal and verbal about it in the last sort of 18 months, really. And that's because I have very high integrity and I need to be able to feel confident of what I'm sharing with people as something that I have tried and tested over and over within my own experience before I'm going to teach it to someone else. And so where I've come to is this. We come into this plane of existence, this physical plane of existence. We come in realized, perfected, whole, complete, divine enlightened beings. And it wasn't until I became a father that I, and was there and witnessed my kid come out and all the piss and the blood and the shit and just like the full experience of it, to recognize that in that moment, whoa, I'm holding like divinity, it's, and so we're born divine, and we're born awake, and we're born connected, and we're born knowing this. And we are born into a consciousness that is programmed with grids of or morphic fields of consciousness, essentially rules of engagement that are non-negotiables if you want to be here, that descend from fucking slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, a very, very boring way of articulating that as well. Just conditioning.
Yeah, power and control and all this kind of crap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is, and it's laden into our educational systems. There's overt propaganda and then there's unconscious propaganda, and it's everywhere, convincing us that we are less than who and what we are in truth, Mm-hmm. And so what happens is that we are born into that, and we grow into that, and then at some point, and we to a certain extent are disconnected from that divine nature, and that we come through and we have like this destiny coding that's within us, that's like, our soul is like, I'm going to go there and I'm going to fucking do this, and then we get here and it's like, whoa, and that's what we're dealing with, right? And it's not like we're just going to go there and have this experience. We're going to go there and have this experience amongst the plethora of distractions that could send us off in any other direction. And so we're born into this planet where the consciousness is unwell, and over the period of our lives, through distraction, through subordination, we hand over our self-sovereignty, we hand over our spirituality, and we digress from that realized truth that we are when we're born. And so I believe that there is a divine plan, and the divine plan is us living in our unlimited nature, us perpetuating that unlimited nature of which we are, and we are divinely connected to the moment we are born. We don't forget when we're born. I believe we forget after we're born. And so our divine plan is how we came through. And so in bringing our lives into, and I believe that what's going on right now is that humanity has strayed so far from its collective divine plan, that all this stuff that's going on at the moment is the breakdown before the breakthrough, and so so there's this divine plan that we have that is essentially our soul destiny coding, and we're all wanting that. And when we're feeling distanced from that, it's evident in our careers, it's evident in our health, it's evident in our mental health, it's evident in our emotional health. We know this, because the shit hits the fan and we change a whole bunch of shit in our lives, and all of a sudden it's like everything's cool again, and it's like, all of this stuff wasn't aligned with who and what we are in truth. So life is this journey of bringing ourselves into a deeper level of alignment with that. And ultimately, I believe that ascension or self-realization, or whatever it is that you want to call it, outside of the jargon, is really just that point where we bring ourselves into total and whole, complete alignment with that. And we realize our divinity was there all along, at which point we're ready to serve. And so that's why I link this whole idea of stepping into your highest timeline of potential with purposeful service, because I don't actually think we came here to ascend. We're already ascended. We came here to serve. We came here to serve each other. We came here to serve humanity. We came here to serve that divine plan of being one.
For sure. Yeah, I haven't heard that articulated in that way before. That, well, especially that last little comment that you believe that we're already ascended and we're here to serve. Yeah, that's a few little tasty morsels within your dialogue there to chew on and digest, for sure.
Yeah, we're born ascended, we're born ascended beings. Masters, I think, is a big term to use, because mastery is like so loaded and perhaps that's the whole idea of being here in the physical, as well as to master it to a new level as a soul being. But I believe that we come here and realized and enlightened and ascended in that sense. And what we're doing is we just spend our lives trying to reach that point. There's a wonderful woman called Shefali Sabri, and if no one's ever heard of her, she's like the most famous person you've never heard of. She's like her book, The Conscious Parent. The foreword was by the Dalai Lama, and the review that went alongside it was by Eckhart Tolle, and it was launched by Oprah Winfrey. So
Okay.
she's pretty famous.
For sure. Yeah.
It was amazing, and I saw this great presentation that she did, where she holds the very same opinion that we're all born awake, and then we lose that level of awakened consciousness because of the world that we're born into. And what she talks about as the coding, she doesn't use the word coding, but I'm going to use it. I would even say they're templates that just come with the morphic field of this planet. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not divine, i.e. I'm not perfect, whole, and complete. And the fourth one that she talks about is that we live our lives in fear that we will never experience that awakened consciousness that we are in truth ever again. And so these things drive our human existence. We act from shame. We act from a lack of worth. We act from, we are away from motivated because we see things as broken as opposed to whole and complete. And fear of success, fear of failure, wherever you link a result and to fear is essentially an expression of, I will never experience my true potential or my divine nature. And so she sees those as kind of like, she calls them imprints, the four major limiting imprints that we that form the part of the coding of humanity's consciousness that we take on. So yeah, so I believe that that when we can actually move out of when we can essentially dissolve the coding around our worthiness, and we can dissolve the coding around our good enoughness, and we can dissolve the coding around not being perfect, whole, and complete, and we can dissolve the coding around that fear and move into an acceptance that we are forever experiencing the infinite unfolding of our true potential in the ever-present now. That's when we boom, come into alignment. And that's when we can really step into service. We remember, and I say this a lot, we remember. The reason we forgot was so we could remember, and the reason we remember is so that we could help those who forgot. And that's how we bring all of us forward into.
Yeah, I love that. And when you're touching on Eckhart Tolle there, I remember reading in one of his books, I can't remember which one it was, maybe it's A New Earth or something similar to that, where he talks about the difference between inner purpose and outer purpose. And he puts forward that inner purpose is the primary purpose, and that is recognizing the divinity within. And the outer purpose, which is what we're doing out there in the world, it's a secondary purpose. And when we have that inner purpose on point, aligned, then whatever our secondary purpose will just flow. It'll be fluid. It'll be nice and smooth, and it'll come out in the natural way that I guess it's meant to. And this is something that I've been tussling with, actually, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Your idea that or not your idea, but perhaps this idea that we are born into perhaps one purpose, or something that we're supposed to, we're being put here on this planet to do something very specific. And I think I've come to settle into this place, or this perspective, that purpose, the secondary purpose, the outer purpose, can be ever changing. It's a fluid thing, and it isn't necessarily defined to one particular thing, because we're so multidimensional, and there are many aspects that make up our lives. And so I tend to see them as purposeful activities that make up, that encapsulate our lives. So look, I'll throw it back to you and just ask what your take is on all that before I start to personally go down a bit of a rabbit hole there.
Yeah, so I think it's really important to make a distinction between purpose and a sense of purpose. So a sense of purpose is is our relationship to that which helps us feel on purpose. And my understanding in the models that I've created is that, and so the processes that I've tested over and over with like hundreds of clients running a process called the Impact Compass, that we each have a unique formula or coding for a sense of purpose, fulfillment, and meaning, right? And so what I see as how we derive a sense of purpose is it's the overlap of what is most important for us to do with our lives, and the strength that it's most important for us to exhibit and work with. And when the thing that you're best at is what you love, and that's what you do, that's when you have a sense of purpose. It's when you wake up every morning and go, I'm doing something today. Because it's like the thing you're freaking awesome at and you love building as a strength, that's actually what you do with your life. That's a sense of purpose. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
Then there's purpose, right? Which is like, what am I here to do? So my purpose is to awaken divine presence in humanity. That's why I'm here.
And encapsulated in a small sentence.
That's it. I'm here to awaken divine presence on this planet. Now, that is not my vision. My vision is a little bit more verbose than that. My vision is a world where everybody understands and knows themselves as that divine presence, and knows and sees it within each other. It's like the term namaste. It's like, I am the God and I see the God in you, which is the God in all of us, right? So it's like, but my mission has shifted along the way. My mission now is to activate and mobilize the Starseeds, who are here to carry out purposeful business and service in order to assist in the raising of consciousness and ultimately the ascension of humanity. So there's different levels to how one might explain purpose from the way I look at it. My purpose is to awaken divine presence in humanity. I derive a sense of purpose through, ultimately where I derive the greatest sense of purpose is through being a father. That's where I derive the greatest sense of purpose. The next greatest sense of purpose that I derive is when I am actively engaged in practices and philosophies that connect us with the divine, and I am doing that through the process of influencing and ideating. And if you look at what I do with my life, that's my business.
For sure.
And that's why I don't have motivation issues. I don't have what am I doing today issues. I don't, because I go to bed and wake up with a fucking epic sense of purpose every day, because that's what I'm doing. Does that make sense?
Makes absolute sense. So essentially, the things that are stopping people from stepping into soul aligned service, it's all the limiting beliefs, it's the dysfunctional, unhealthy patterns and programs. We've got to shed all of that stuff so that we can step into this remembering of our divine selves. And it's from this place that we can tap into what it really is that lights us up and live our lives from that place. And this obviously all ties back into this, perhaps maybe the most important thread, which is being in service. Being in service to the greater good.
Totally.
As one of my maestros would say, para el bien de todos, for the greater good of all.
That's it. My belief is, and I really truly believe this, right, is that each and every one of us just wants to be operating within our key area of impact in life, and your key area of impact is when you yourself are fulfilled in what you're doing. You yourself have such a deep sense of meaning that you could almost cry. And you yourself have this continual sense of purpose. And when you're fulfilled and you have meaning and you have a sense of purpose, where all of those overlap is essentially your key area of impact, your due north, or that's why I call it an impact compass, the compass that points in the direction. And it's like, you might, it's like orienteering. Sometimes you have to go off your compass to get to where you need to go. But as long as you're still staying on your compass and heading towards that point you need to get to, then that's fine. But the way I look at it is that anything that doesn't align with that compass point is not for you. And that's one of the hardest things that people That's actually the hardest thing. Normally, when I do this thing called Impact Compass, do like a full purpose 360 behavioral assessments, like Clifton Strength Finders and purpose profilers and values discovery methods and MBTIs and all sorts of shit. And I run
Sounds
it through
in
a
depth.
model. Yeah, I run it through a model. And whenever I put it in front of people, 95, no, I would say 98% of people go, oh, of course. All right. And 2% go, I've been living my life totally wrong. Right. You know,
Better late than never.
98% go, of course, I knew it all along. You know, we all know this. We all know it. It's just that we're so distracted. We're so subordinated to other people's values. We are so separated from our sovereignty, not just on the individual level of limiting beliefs and behaviors and all this stuff that you talked about, but the compounding factor of all of the crap that's just sitting in our misaligned stuff that's sitting in our field of collective consciousness, you know. But when we get into, we just all want to be in that key area of impact. We want to know what that is, and we want to say that and own that with volition, and we want to wake up every morning and be on that. And when you are, that's when you are totally at service. It's always service. I've never come out with the key area of impact. No one has ever come out with a key area of impact in front of me that hasn't been service oriented. It's always linked to helping others. It can't not be, you know. So that's my vibe on it anyway.
Yeah, no, it totally resonates. And I think for some people, at least, I say some people because this is what I experienced many moons ago, way back early on my journey. I was doing a lot of the self-development work, a lot of the spiritual expansion work to work on myself. But there comes a point where something clicks and it's like, wait a second, I'm not doing this work for myself anymore. The reason that I've been building these foundations and allowing all the detritus of everything that I've accumulated from being indoctrinated into a largely distraction-based society and culture, as you were speaking to, when I got rid of all that stuff, it's like, I'm doing this work for everyone around me. I'm doing it for my family, for my friends, for community, for all my loved ones, for the entirety of, well, to establish or reestablish right relationship to everything in this interconnected web on our planet. And that, for me, was the start of the recognition of the importance of being in service and getting out of a solely an egocentric or a self-centered point of view and stepping into that greater sense of, okay, yeah, I'm here to do something else now.
Yeah,
aside from just work on myself.
I go through chapters of a level of development. So at the moment, I'm embracing a chapter of understanding what it is to step into divine leadership, and I'm getting some assistance and some mentoring around that as well, you know. And so I was having a conversation with my soul where I said, hey, is the divine leader here in service of the person, is the divine leader here in service of self, in service of others, or in service of the system? And I was expecting my soul was going to say it's in service of all of it. And my soul came forward and said it's in service of none of that. And I said, what do you mean? And it said, because at the level of soul, there is no self, others, and system. It just is. And I was like, so what is it? So what is divine leadership in service of? And it said it's in service of the divine plan. It's in service of source's intentions for creativity, because everything is created by source.
Yeah, sure. It's taking that step up again, zooming out and seeing things from that meta perspective.
That's right. There is no self and others. From the soul perspective, there is no self and others. It's one. Like, this is why I say, you know, it's in that, I believe that you know, that point of collective ascension, collective enlightenment, shifting consciousness, the tipping point, whatever you want to call it. My feeling is that it's like when we actually realize that we are the one, individually and the whole, and that was always the same thing anyway, you know. Yeah. And I think it's interesting because, yeah, once you start getting into soul psychology, I guess is a good term for it. It's like, you know, soul doesn't live within those illusions of separation, and, you know, That's the best way I can put it.
The thought just came in. Actually, I'm laughing at myself thinking, I wonder if it would have been a good idea or a bad idea to smoke a little bit of cannabis beforehand. Before going into this conversation, because I love talking about this, and when I ingest just a little bit of cannabis, whether it's through vaporizer or a pipe or edibles, I tend to go super deep down the rabbit hole. But perhaps it would have been a bad thing, since people probably don't want to hear us carry on for 4 to 5 hours. But look, hey, before we start to wrap things up, I want to throw a few rapid fire questions your way. Actually, I've got a few things that I'm interested in. So, what kind of daily or weekly practices do you have in place to keep you centered and grounded so you don't burn out?
Awesome. Yeah, I every day take a moment to. So I'm a father I'm basically work during the week and on my business, and then I'm a solo father on the weekend. So it's like sort of for me sometimes it's finding time to do big long practices. Although I love doing it, is ultimately really good. It's also a little impractical. So I on a daily basis do that process that I just took you guys through as we started, and allow my soul to come through and say what it needs to say and express itself and set the magic and the intention for the day ahead, and to map my frequency. That's how I use that to align with my divine plan on a daily basis, is actually just hand myself over to the intention of my soul on a daily basis, with complete detachment from me understanding on a mental level what that is. Just let my soul say its intention in my light language, and to feel its intention in my heart, and just then get on with my day and let it let go into the day. And I try and do that. I try and start at least 5 days a week like that. I set regular alarms to do things like so one of the things that I'm going to teach in this program that I've got coming up, Aligned with Destiny, a part of that is actually going to be teaching people how to access high vibrational frequencies within their soul family. And so, one of my gifts is that I can just tune into frequencies very, very easily. So I have an alarm that goes off a couple of times a day that just says, "Get your freak on." And that's where I tune in and I go, okay, cool. I open myself up to receive the highest, most aligned frequencies of divine love and light right now, and just boom, and just bring in a frequency that I know is aligning me with my divine plan. I'm actually even said it, I'm happening right now. So I do that a couple of times a day, and they're kind of like the base core practices that I have. I also have core practices of tuning into. A lot of the time in my work, I can feel this intensity start to grow during the week, and I've come to know that as the feeling of a lot of energy, a lot of source coding, and a lot of inspired spiritual creative energy that wants to come through that hasn't actually been channeled through yet. So what I do, at least probably 4 times a week, 5 times a week, is to actively anchor that into the planetary field. So tune into that feeling of this desire to create that I just don't have the words for or haven't created the program for yet, and I just let it go into the field of the earth and just share it through the entirety of humanity, and let humanity have it. It's like it obviously needs to come through. I don't need to own it. It was never mine in the first place. So I've come to recognize that that's a necessity for me to do. So, so tuning into the divine energy and inspiration that I'm here to channel into the planet, tuning into the frequencies that will align me at certain points during the day with my highest timeline of limitless potential and purposeful service, and setting up protocols essentially for my day that essentially open and attune my channel before I even start, and then I just go into the day and channel myself and channel my higher self and have that opening to channel my guides as well. And they're probably the 3 core practices that I have that get me through. And then on top of that, if I've got time, I smash out. Ages ago, I put together and formalized an embodiment system called Inner Essence that I taught for 4 years and had a couple of hundred students, including some advanced level students. And so there's quite a few components of that I've been jamming for ages, which are like combinations of heaps of martial arts and yoga and meditation and embodiment arts that I've done. So I bring all of those together, and I sit down and I just tune into what it is that I need to do. And if I've got an hour and a half up my sleeve, I will just let myself go into a channeled process of movement and embodiment,
Yeah, beautiful. So aside from your connection to source and aside from nature, what else or who else might you consider to be some of your own mentors or role models or teachers who have greatly informed the path that you're on, the work that you've done, and that other people might be interested in taking a look at?
Yeah. So my current mentor is a lady by the name of Gabby Kowalski. And if you listen to this, Gabby, massive love and just gratitude and appreciation for the presence that you are within my life. She's been a epic source of really helping me come out into the world, and really to own my gifts without any judgment of myself, and just to put them out there and say what needs to be said, and let that become, I guess, the magnet for how I create opportunity in my world. I've had some exceptional mentors along the way. I think I did a series of, I must have done 10 or so different courses with a guy by the name of Justin Moikaha Asar. Justin is the fellow and the ascended being, physicalized ascended being on the planet, who's brought through the liquid crystal system, the liquid trees, the star child directives, a true, in my mind, a true physicalized ascended being, doing really solid, grounded, but high level magic work on the planet, and doing it with great humility, So I studied with him for years as well. Gee whiz, I years ago I studied with Eric Pearl, directly with Eric Pearl, studying reconnective healing through advanced levels. I spent some time studying with a guy by the name of Richard Bartlett from Matrix Energetics, who has been a phenomenal inspiration as well. He's pretty crazy, and that's what you need sometimes to break through the rule sets that bind us into certain realities. He was the first person that I ever studied with who really fucking taught you how to challenge a morphic field, like really challenge it, but to do it with the biggest smile and the goofiest freaking, least serious approach to enlightenment and self-actualization. And his co-presenter, and who in her own right I think is an incredible master, a lady by the name of Melissa Joy, or M Joy, who's I don't think there's anyone who's quite mapped the quantum physics of the heart field like she has. She's amazing. Spent some time studying with her for a while. Gee whiz. I also, and a friend of mine who I just knew as Frank, who taught me the 5 Tibetan rites about 18, 19 years ago, which, Frank, if you're watching this, you saved my life, man. And he taught me the Tibetan rites, and I went along, I hadn't studied any formal healing, and I went along, he said, oh, look, I did some work with this guy. I did shiatsu. I studied with him, and he said to me, hey, I'm running this thing where I'm going to teach people how to channel and do some healing. And I was like, what's channeling? What's healing? Let's do this, And so he taught the Tibetan rites, and then we would go into this channeled spaces of just letting whatever healing tech come through. And the first class I ever did with him blew my mind. A friend of mine who was really quite advanced at the time said to me, that there is all you need to do. What you just did there, you could go and study a million things, or you could just do what this guy just taught you. I, of course, went and studied a million things. But Frank was incredible inspiration in that he really taught me that it really is just about, through embodiment and meditation, aligning yourself with your true self, and then opening up to your inner wisdom and just letting that come through. So they're just some of the people that I've studied with along the way, who've been formative in the work that I've done.
Nice. So, final question before I get you to plug your program that you got coming up. A bit of a curveball. What are you not very good at that you're currently trying to get better at?
Oh, good one. what am I not very good at that I'm currently trying to get better at? There's a voice in my head that said fatherhood. Um,
I'm sure a lot of people could relate.
yeah, actually, I think I am a good dad. I think I'm a really good dad, but it's just like it's the
I can relate with that. Yeah, for
you
sure.
always
Yeah.
feel like the shit at it. Doesn't matter how good you are.
There's always room for improvement.
Let's talk about curveballs. Um, uh,
Mm.
yeah, and that's the first one that comes to mind. And yeah, and I think as well, in my earlier years of running a business, I wasn't particularly good at sales, and I wasn't particularly good at marketing. You know, and so these days, I've been working really hard at becoming proficient at sales and marketing because uh, the success of my service to a certain extent to the planet is hinging on my ability to honestly represent whom what I am in truth and be able to put that out there without fear and do it in an aligned way. And I feel that, I went and studied, as you said, I studied, with some great, you and I had a quick chat before we jumped on. I studied for years with some dudes who are just absolute masters at sales and marketing, and none of it worked for me, right? Because they're not soul aligned beings. And since I've actually been focusing on doing the vibrational work and approaching my business from a vibrational sense and approaching my business as understanding it as an extension of my soul, and rather than something that I am creating, something that my soul is creating through me, that my business, that my products, that my content are all divine beings that are assisting, that want to channel through me, and that my avatar and my audience are a soul being who I'm here to serve. And taking myself and my identity out of the marketing and sales process altogether and bringing the channeling concept into the sales and marketing, I believe that I'm actually starting to get a lot better at that, and it feels nicer as well, because really I'm just, your sales and your marketing and your business is just an authentic expression, soul aligned expression of yourself, and you can just be in your flow. So they're fatherhood and sales and marketing. There you go.
Perfect, Heath. All right, look, mate, before we hop off, where would you like to direct people? And this is a good time to give a plug for your program coming up as well.
Yeah. So in June, commencing with a 4 to 5 hour ceremony on June 21st, which is the solstice here in Australia. I'm launching Align with Destiny, which is about aligning and activating your highest timeline of limitless potential and purposeful service. So it's really about teaching people consciousness tools and consciousness practices to become a vibrational match for that quantum reality that their soul wishes to create through their business and their service in the world. So the work that I do is specifically for impact-driven business owners, impact-driven, purpose-driven leaders who are Starseeds and Lightworkers, people who are really, really dedicated to their business and their being a soul-aligned creative service that assists in the raising of consciousness in humanity. So Align with Destiny, my plan is to do a whole bunch of programs over the next 12 months that will be including thought leadership programs, how to unpack your soul's philosophical framework of how it wishes to communicate through you, and then using that through social media presence, programs around leadership, programs around sales and marketing itself. But where I'm actually starting is with a program that's all about vibrational alignment, because I believe that you can go and you can come up with a whole bunch of social media content. You can plan your business sideways using all the best books. But for Starseeds and Lightworkers, if you are not a vibrational match for the destiny that your soul is trying to create for you and humanity, you're always going to be challenged and struggling. So Align with Destiny is really about stepping sideways for a moment from your business to work on yourself, to help your business, and to do the real soul work, to connect with your soul, to reactivate your soul memory, to call forward your soul mastered characteristics, to understand what your source codes are and your mission is, that you're here to anchor for humanity, and how to, and gathering all of your spiritual guidance team together and becoming a conscious channel for that, learning advanced channeling, so that you can come back into your business a vibrational match and alignment for what it is that you're trying to create through your business. So that's kicking off. It's a 12-week program that kicks off in mid-June. And if people are interested in that, you can go to, are you able to provide a link or something alongside with this, or?
I will provide all of the show notes for people to jump on board onto the website and dive into all that you've got to offer.
Yeah, so I'll leave a link there for the online brochure, which explains it completely. And I invite people to just read that and to receive it vibrationally, because it's coded as well. And as well, I'll also give you a link, Kai, for my free online activations and workshops page, so people can go and watch all of the Starseed activations that I do, which I do once every 6 weeks, where I bring through a new code that's either channeled through the Arcturians or the Pleiadians or the Syrians, that I bring through for the Starseed. So I've got a whole bank of recordings there that I'm happy to give the listeners as well. And as well, if anyone wants to jump in a Facebook group that I've started, where I do a short weekly activation at 11 a.m. every Friday, they can just look up Vibe Time on Facebook and come and join the Vibe Time Facebook group.
Sounds epic, man. Yeah. Thanks for sharing everything. Hey, look, just as we opened up the space and I invited you to share a few words, I would love to do the same again in light of honoring the sacred and closing the container of our conversation, whether it's words, song, poem, gratitude, whatever's coming through, mate.
Yeah, beautiful. So what I'm getting is that there's there's a team of guides that I work with, which are called the Elohimic Council. They're a higher order nature angelics that are essentially creative keepers of Earth, and so what I'm getting is that there's a transmission to come through for me that's a blessing for everyone who's been listening to this, and for you yourself too, Kai. So just give me a second. Te watahara hanunyane ke wa no hanunyane mawana hara hatu kuro toto hua haha te ke wa hana hananyane wara hatu te wa hataku hataete mahananyane kera u tukutuku wa hata rahanyane wana hata tukutu re nyane wana mawan huku kiate te wa hatu yate batu tereate o yo yeah. Oh, brother, so good to share with you and hang out. So oh my God.